And welcome to this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. I am your host today, Derek Havens, and joining me is Steve Balscherry. We are both PatsFans.com bloggers. In this episode today, Steve and I are going to be sharing our thoughts on the Patriots 2023 NFL draft class. Excited to kind of break down everything and a lot to talk about after a busy weekend. First, before we kick things off, Steve, how are we doing today?
Been a rough couple of days. I mean, you and I talked offline, but I'm glad to be distracted for a little while, talking about some football, and I'm excited to see how all of these people will mesh together and see how they all will or will not make the roster. I know most of them will, but
right, I know. When as you just said to me, right before we kicked off the show, they have, they started with 11 picks, Steve. We thought maybe they'd bundle some up, maybe you get closer to 8 selections. They actually came away with 12 players, not to mention the undrafted guys. So there's, it's going to be some good competition. I mean, certainly they have more holes to fill than they've had in previous years. The last few years they've been kind of flipping over the roster. And I think there's a couple of selections that we'll discuss here that I think could lean towards kind of showing how they want to move in a kind of a different direction. Because my first initial take on this class, Steve, is that it seems to be another year, I would say, compared to last year and maybe even a little bit the year before, where the new thing people talk about is RAS, which is relative athletic score. And it seems like they've been attacking more of the more athletes than they have in previous years. I think as they kind of change their roster to mold more to the modern game than maybe Bill's previous philosophy would be. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the guys they drafted last year and again this year, and by and large, all of those guys are scoring very, very well in the RAS. So,
for example, Keon White, who we'll talk about here shortly, I think he had the 15th highest relative athletic score since 1986 for defensive linemen. So you're talking about one of the better athletes that's come out in the last 37 years or whatever it is, and I. Again, that's it. It is a little relative, and it depends on how you want to pick through those numbers. But my point is, Steve, is in the past, I think Bill has had like specifically for like his defense, kind of bigger, stronger, stouter guys, and I think that we've seen a little bit of a shift, especially in the front seven, to some more some more athletic type of players. So I just thought it was a little interesting. Before we start going down through the picks, I'm just going to tell everyone, please subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Be sure to check us out on Apple Podcasts. Like, share, leave us a review. It keeps us high in the podcast rankings to help other Patriots fans find us. Okay, Steve, let's talk about the draft class. And you know what? We had a show on Friday morning last week discussing the first pick overall, which was Christian Gonzalez, the cornerback out of Oregon. We both really enjoyed the picks. I am, over the moon about what he can bring. He's not even 21 yet. He's got good size, great hips, good fluid movements. He's quick. Just seems like a really, really smart and a good athlete. And when he actually was on the Patriots.com Patriots Unfiltered show and did an interview with them, and Evan Lazar, who writes for Patriots.com, friend of the show, he was talking to Christian about, because Oregon's defense is very is more complex than a lot of other college defenses, and how they kind of spin the dial, and Christian Gonzalez had a good opportunity to learn about different schemes and different coverages and play in a lot of different things, and I think that it just shows, why he'd be a good fit here, Steve. And I'm excited for what he can bring to the table here.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that we're now reading a lot of stories where some teams, and I think this is a classic case where they start overthinking things.
Mm-hmm.
They start overanalyzing things, and they cherry-picked one game that he didn't have a great game on, and they're saying he's not physical enough. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what you people are thinking, but to drop him down on your draft boards, thank God. Thank the big guy in the sky, because that just put him up there for the Patriots to grab. I think it's a fantastic pick. And I was so surprised when he was still on the board. In fact, I was kind of hoping before the draft that they were going to get a big time edge rusher. Because I think, you and I talked about it. I thought they were going defense for sure. Yeah. But we, in our, never in our wildest dreams did we believe that Gonzalez was going to be there for the Patriots to take. And when he was there, I was like, boy, they need to grab him quick. And certainly enough, they did. I think it was a fantastic pick. I think he's going to be superb in this league.
Yeah, I thought he could go to the Lions at 6 overall. And, then there was the Eagles that were there. Of course, Jalen Carter fell into their lap, which some people predicted he could slide, to about that spot. But certainly there was several players or several spots I thought that Gonzalez could go. And, then, Steve, they come back with their second pick and they take Keion White, defensive end, defensive tackle, depending on where you slot him, from Georgia Tech. Real big guy. Kind of has, he's not like Josh Uche, for example, but he's kind of more of like a more athletic Dietrich Twige in my mind. Like I kind of see him in that mold. There's a little bit of, I don't want to say controversy about him, but there's some, I guess, differing opinions where someone, I think like Daniel Jeremiah, I want to say had him around 27 or 28. And I've seen other people have him, closer to 60. So, kind of a late first, second round player. And the Patriots were able to nab him right there at number 46 overall. Thoughts on Keion White?
Oh, I thought, again, when you see the player and you see the tape, people's, how can he be an edge guy at 285? And or actually play, outside backer. And I was like, when you watch the tape of this guy, I watched him chase in very tight coverage a running back going on a wheel route all the way down the field. And I was like, at 285, to watch a guy do that, I was like, I am ultra impressed with this guy, because he can stand up and set the edge. Now, is he going to be a prolific pass rusher? I'm not sure about that, but he can get after it. And what I like about him, and again, it's what they love. They love guys who are versatile. He can play outside on obvious passing downs. He can kick you inside and play next to Barmore and still push that pocket. I just think these two picks, I thought, were absolute home runs.
Yeah, I mean, look, we talked about how like an edge player like this, and you can call him an edge, you can call him an end. I guess we could split hairs over, those kind of things. But I would say, I like the fact that he can kick inside. I think that you could, cause some disruption with him and Barmore in the middle there. And, I think that, for example, someone like a Lawrence Guy, he's been a good player for this team for years now, but he's going to cost more money than someone like this. And if they want to get younger, maybe faster and kind of turn that page, I could see him being like a Lawrence Guy kind of replacement. And I think he has some similarities to Lawrence Guy, but probably a little bit more of, athleticism there. I would call him, I think Lawrence Guy is more of a DT and this guy's more of a D end, but there are some similarities there. And, I think that, again, it just turns it's another example of them getting more athletic, as is the next pick in Marte Mapu, who's the linebacker safety out of Sacramento State. And this is someone who I know Daniel Jeremiah raved about. He didn't test, so we don't really have a lot of those numbers, but he's 6'3", 217. He's kind of like a fly around inside the box kind of guy. He actually revealed that his growing up in California, his dad and Junior Seau played football together, and they were actually pretty close. But this is someone who, again, depending on who you talk to, maybe it was a reach, maybe it wasn't. Like I know Lance Zierlein from NFL NFL.com thought he was a midday 3 selection, where Daniel Jeremiah again had him a little bit higher. But he's a versatile guy, Steve, with some good athleticism and some long speed, and I think he could be an inside the box safety.
Oh yeah, I think he's going to be again a versatile guy. He can be a safety, he can be a dime linebacker. They can move him around. He's even played some in the slot.
Yep.
And when you watch the tape of him, this guy flies around the field. Now, initially, I'm going to contradict myself because initially I was a little disappointed in this pick because of my own biases. I really wanted them to take Tyler Kraft, the tight end. But, they decided to go with this guy. They saw him up close, during the Shrine Bowl,
Yep.
So then I was listening to Daniel Jeremiah, and he said he is my favorite player in this draft. And when he said that, I immediately said, okay, I need to look closer at this guy. And when you watch the tape of him, it's absolutely, you can see why they really like this kid. He flies around the field. He hits like a brick wall. He's very instinctive. I've come around. Although I wanted Tyler Kraft, I understand why they love this kid. And again, they made their first 3 picks on defense. And at first, I had texted you. I was like, man, they're not drafting anyone on offense. But again, they're thinking ahead. All of these quarterbacks now in the AFC East are really good. So
the AFC in general.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But inside the division, they're going to play, 6 games against, the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Bills. And, their defense was very good last year, but they could have upgraded in a couple of spots. And, I think this kid it's going to be fun to see how they choose to use him. And I really think he's going to be really good.
So I agree with you that I thought that I was a little disappointed with this pick initially, only because, I had heard of him, but I didn't really know much about him. I will say that I was more disappointed because I thought that they should have targeted either a receiver or a tight end, tackle, something like that. And they went in this direction. Although at the same time, Steve, I don't want to contradict myself either. Before free agency started, I was talking about wanting, Tremaine Edmonds, the linebacker who went from the Bills to the Bears. And I think that pairing him with Juwan Bentley makes a ton of sense. And, if you're talking about, some athletic quarterbacks in the division, someone to spy, someone to move around. He can move around with some kind of move tight ends. I think that that's an important trait to have. I would just say that the only thing I'm a little worried with him is the fact that sometimes with these tweeners where it's like what's his position? And I hope the team has a plan for that, and maybe it's just to move him around, but you have a lot of guys that do that. Duggar, Peppers, Adrian Phillips, you have a lot of these guys in that similar mold, and maybe it's just, hey, we're going to get all these athletes on the field and go, but I worry about that a little bit, Steve. To me, that's one of my biggest concerns. With the next pick, they go Jake Andrews, the center from Troy, at 107 overall. I thought, Steve, again, there was a couple other offensive linemen that I liked more than Andrews. He was a little more lower rated on some boards, but we had talked about David Andrews maybe potentially getting a replacement for him as he's getting up there, and they don't really have a backup center. I don't think Cody Russey's really overly impressive, which he was on the roster last year. So they take Jake Andrews here as a potential, groomed prospect for David Andrews to replace him down the line.
Yeah, and I wrote about him on Sunday because I said, when they drafted him, I felt like it was a little bit of a reach.
Yep.
Obviously, they liked him well enough to grab him, at 107, and he was a 3-year starter at all 3 interior offensive line positions,
which is important. Yep,
that's important. And he moved to center permanently last season, and he started all 12 games. He's not very athletic, but he's got that big, wide girth, and he can hold up against nose tackles in protection. And he does. He's pretty physical in the running game. So maybe they thought, hey, you know what? This guy can fulfill a couple of different positions for us if need be. And when the time is right and David Andrews is going to hang it up, and maybe he can step into that. So, first impression, again, I thought they reached a little bit for him. As you said, I thought there was a couple other guys that were on the board that I liked a little better. But,
Yeah. Well, I mean, the inside versatility, I mean, they like versatility in all their players, especially their offensive linemen. But I think especially with center, having that center guard versatility is important. And look, and this started their run of multiple interior linemen. And the next guy is Eastern Michigan's Sidy Sow, who I believe that's how it's pronounced, who they took at 117, 10 picks later.
You forgot 112.
Who's 112?
Chad Ryland.
Oh, so I'm looking at, okay, so I'm on I'm on an NBC page and they don't even have him listed on here. Okay, so let's back up.
Yeah,
then.
they traded picks 120 and 184 to the Jets.
Yeah, I was pulling up. I just pulled up a site so I could just go through each pick and kind of run through it. And they don't even have Chav Ryland on here. Okay, so 112, Chav Ryland, the kicker out of Maryland. Second kicker taken off, Steve. The 49ers took Jake Moody at 99 overall, which is really high.
I thought that was a great pick.
I mean, a lot of people hate it. Hate taking a kicker so high. But here's the thing. Some people were complaining about them taking some specialists on day 3. But the same people that are going to complain about them taking the specialists also are going to bitch because they sucked on special teams all last year. So Nick Folk is not going to be able to be around forever. Jake Bailey was horrendous. They needed to go ahead and replace these guys, and maybe this Ryland kid, maybe he just hangs around and Nick Folk, kicks for one more year, but he's a 5-year kicker. He has a ton of experience. He has plenty of leg to do 50-yarders. He has kickoff experience, which is important. I think I'm not going to sit here and break down his kick, the kicking mechanics, so to speak. But I think they needed to take a kicker here, and Chad Ryland was the second highest rated on consensus, around the league.
Yeah, I like this pick because, again, they know they need a kicker, and why push it and, risk seeing someone else take this guy, then it puts you in a total bind. Because I think after the first 2 kickers, I think the quality of kickers goes down substantially after that.
I agree.
And, that's why I thought, hey, the 49ers know, that that Robbie Gould ain't going to last forever either. And they took Moody. And, the Patriots know that this guy was the second best rated kicker in the draft. And they liked him enough in playing at Maryland. He has kicked in poor weather. Mm-hmm. So that's something to keep in mind. And he has an incredible amount of range, much more so than Nick Folk. He's not quite as accurate as Nick Folk. So, that's something we'll have to watch. But when it comes to range, this kid's got it. And I think he was a really good pick.
Yeah, no, I agree. So next pickup was City Sao from Eastern Michigan, the guard, massive guard, Steve, 6'5", 323, 10.5-inch hands, almost 34-inch arms, which is really long. So he almost has a little bit of like a tackle to him, which he actually did start at Eastern Michigan at left tackle as a true freshman. And then he moved over to left guard, where he spent a lot of time there. So give me your thoughts on City Sao. Again, Eastern Michigan.
Yeah, again, I mean, you're talking about a guy that has prototypical size for a left tackle, 6'5", 323. I mean, to have a guy that big that plays left guard, he's had some experience at tackle. Again, he's a versatile guy, and he played 5 years, 56 games with 54 starts at Eastern Michigan. So he has
good numbers.
He has some experience, and again, they push this guy inside. I think he'll compete. He'll compete for, not only a spot on the roster, he'll compete for playing time.
Oh, I agree. I mean, and he is, again, an interesting guy, more versatility. I do think that those interior line spots, they do need to beef up their depth there. And I think they did it with that pick and their next pick, which is Antonio Mafe, the guard from UCLA. And again, another guy with pretty big size, 6'3", 338. He was a senior coming out. And he started 9 to 12 games as a freshman. He started 5 games his sophomore year. He moved all the way around the offensive line. He second team all Pac-12. Last season. Just a big frame, and someone who just, if you just look at him, you're just like, dang, he is so. He's got a nice wide base, and looks like a powerful dude, and he plays with a lot of size,
and he plays with an edge to his game.
Yes.
In the running game, I was watching some tape because I didn't know anything about him.
I didn't either,
and so I was like, when they took this guy, I was watching some tape on him Saturday night, and I was like, man, this guy plays with a mean streak in the running game. I mean, and, he started off at UCLA as a nose tackle. He played for nose tackle with several starts for 2 years, and then they switched him to the offensive line. He came to UCLA at 411 pounds, and now he's down to 3. Wow. Yeah. He's down to 329 now. I think he could still fix to lose another 15 to 20 more pounds. I think it would make him a little more.
A little quicker.
Yeah. But, he plays with that mean streak. And,
And we were talking about this off air, though, Steve. It's like all these interior linemen. Is it just depth? Is it, Cole Strange insurance? Is Mike and are they kind of telling us Mike Onwenu's not going to be re-signed? Are they going to move Onwenu to right tackle and plug one of these younger guys in at right guard? I mean, there's a lot of questions there that some of these selections kind of have, I think it just makes an interesting discussion.
Yeah. And, it's funny because, when you and I were talking about this offline, we were talking about the same things. Is this Cole Strange insurance? Is this meaning they're not going to re-sign Michael Onwenu, who's played really well? Or are they going to move Michael Onwenu to right tackle? I mean, I think the answer is D, all of the above. I think it might be all of those things because they picked up, all interior offensive linemen. And, I was curious why they didn't take a tackle in the draft. And then I was almost finished with my Sunday column, and then I saw Matt Groh, and he was talking about the 3 additions they made during free agency. He was kind of giving the impression that they're happy with where their tackle situation is now. So I found that a tad surprising, but he gave the impression he likes their guys, and so they wanted to beef up the depth interior wise. And I think with the guys that they carried as depth guys a year ago, maybe these guys are going to step in and play themselves into a roster spot.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. The next pick, Steve, was really an interesting one. And you have Keishawn Butte, the receiver from LSU, and you get him in the 6th round. And this was a player prior to this college season that was projected as a potential first-round pick. I mean, and he had 2 really, really good years before this last season that was, I would say, uneven at best. But 5'11", 195, ran a 4.5. My favorite thing about him, Steve, that I really think he could grow into is I like the fact that, when he can uncover real quick underneath, and he has some pretty good yard, some yard after the catch ability. And I also think that his inside-outside versatility, he just looks like someone that I think could be a good developmental spot. And to get him in the 6th round, I thought was a very good value for the Patriots here.
Oh, yeah, because this is a total non-risk, very, very low risk, high value pick. Like you said, before last season, he was expected that he might go as early as the 1st round, this year. And then he struggled. He had an injury, and he had a very forgettable, season, as well as, there was some off-field concerns where he didn't play in the bowl game, where they said he was unavailable, which is kind of intriguing in its own right. But the guy's only 20 years old also. He won't turn 21 until, I think it's Sunday, May 7th. So he's a young guy. And he's the most intriguing player, I think, of this draft, because if they can get him completely healthy again and, work with the coaches and get some of those inconsistencies out, he has good size. He's actually a big slot guy at 6 foot, 205, but he does have that versatility where, he can work outside or in the Z. He runs good crisp routes most of the time. And, that was one of the knocks on him last year. He got a little sloppy with his routes at times, but he can be explosive because, like you said, prior to last season, he was expected to be the next great LSU wide receiver. So yep. I think taking him where they did, this is a very low risk and high ceiling kind of pick.
Yeah, so the biggest concern with him is the right ankle injury too. He had 2 surgeries on it. I think he gets a little, I think you mentioned this. I just think he gets a little sloppy sometimes. And so I just think that that's ultimately what caused him, to fall. And, I just think the Patriots, if they can work with this guy and they can clean up his route running, help him with his, his ball skills a little bit, he has the playmaking ability. So if they can work with him, I think that we could be talking about a year from now. I think we could be talking about him being a top 3 receiver for them. And then I also could sit here and say, well, if he gets hurt, or if his ankle's hurt again, and if he can't clean up his technique and he continues with some of the drops and some of these things, I think 2 years from now, he could be off the team. So it is a boomer bust pick, but that's why he was in there for the 6th round.
Yeah. I mean, if they had taken him in the 3rd or 4th round, I would have been kind of leery of that pick, but taking him at 187 in the 6th, I thought was a no-brainer. I was actually surprised he was still there. During the draft, you lose track of guys, and he was one of those guys I was wondering where he would go. But I like it. I like this pick because I think, again, it's a very low-risk pick. If he busts out, he was a 6th round draft pick.
Exactly. we're just going to step aside here for podcast purposes and take a quick break. We have 4 more draft picks to get to. Then Steve and I are going to talk about our favorite and least favorite selections and give an initial draft grade. I also see a couple people have sent in some questions, so we can get to those too. And we will be back right after this. Okay, and we are back here on Patriots 4th and 2, the official podcast of PatsFans.com. Steve and I are going to continue to break down this draft class, and we are up with the second specialist, Steve, which is Bryce Baringer, who is the Michigan State punter, selected 192nd overall. I'm again similar to the Chad Ryland pick. I'm not going to sit here and break down punting techniques, Steve, because I'm just not qualified to do that. But he led the nation in both gross and net punting yards. He had a punt of 60-plus yards in 8 of 12 games last season. So, he kicked in cold weather. So he's a guy with a pretty big leg, supposedly pretty good, directionally, and is with some good hang time. So they could use some punting upgrades after last year. The last 2 years, Jake Bailey's his struggles have been so bad. So it's nice that they kind of addressed this. I know some people are upset about it. I have no problem taking a specialist on day 3, Steve.
No, and I really like this pick again. He broke his own school record last year. He averaged 49 yards a punt. For his college career, he averaged 46, and I think it was 46 and a half. And he was the he was the Big Ten punter of the year. During the Senior Bowl, for the whole week, he led the way in average punt height, 71.7 feet in height. The longest hang time was 5.92 seconds, and the longest punt, 78.3 yards.
Yeah, there you go. I mean,
that's a big leg.
That's a big leg. There's no doubt. The next pick, Steve, Demario Douglas, I thought was fascinating because he kind of reminds me a little bit of Marcus Jones. Just an athlete on the field, out of Liberty. Again, you're talking about a day 3 guy, but he's only 5'8", 180, but he ran a 4.4, has a lot of wiggle to him. He has some return experience. He had a lot of success with Malik Willis, who was the 3rd-round draft pick in 2021 that went to the Titans. He's got a lot of quickness. I think he's a little inconsistent on his routes, but he's shifty and slippery, Steve, and you saw that all over his tape.
Yeah. Again, you watch this guy's tape. Granted, he's playing against lesser competition at Liberty, but last year, 79 catches, 993 yards, 6 touchdowns. He returned where's my notes? He had touchdown returns of 75 in 2021 and a 73-yard return for a touchdown in 2020. So you're talking about a guy who's electric when he gets the ball in his hands. And if you haven't watched the tape of him, folks, check it out. He is electric with the ball in his hands. He can make people miss. He can get open, even with his small stature. He can get open at the line of scrimmage, and he can make stuff happen with in space. So, again, 6th-round pick. I think he has a legitimate shot of making the team.
I definitely
at least on the practice squad.
Yeah, no, I think he could be a fun player to mess around with. I think that, again, I wouldn't pencil him into making the roster, but I think that he could be an interesting practice squad guy, Steve, and someone who could be, valuable on like the scout team for certain athletes, etc. And something to think in mind, keep in mind. The next pick, we have Amir Speed, the cornerback out of Michigan State. Steve, first thing that jumps out to you about this guy, his size. He's 6'3", 209. And I watched him. I didn't think anything really stood out a whole bunch, but you talk about his speed plus his size, and apparently he's got some good special teams. Like he could be a potential core special teamer. I think that's what ultimately could land him on the roster as a valuable back end guy. But I think he's more of a year one practice squad guy that, fights for a spot and maybe he can make it as like that last cornerback on the roster if he can step up and elevate for special teams.
Oh yeah. I mean, you're talking about a really big guy that ran a 4.3.
Yep.
4.33 in the 40. And, he played 5 years. Was it him? All right, I'm getting confused here.
Well, he's another guy that's a little bit older because, and again, we're seeing that COVID trickle-down effect where you're seeing a lot of guys who maybe aren't 25, but a lot of 23, 24-year-old guys.
Yeah. Now, he played in Georgia for 48 games, and he had 592 special team snaps while at Georgia. And then he transferred to Michigan State last year because he wanted to play more at corner, and where Georgia, he might not have had a shot at that. And he started 11 of 12 games last year. I think he's still pretty raw at cornerback, but you're talking a guy with another guy with blistering speed, a ton of special teams experience. And I totally agree with you. He might be a practice squad player this year, but he's going to be a gunner, after Cody Davis and Matthew Slater, guys like that, when they decide to hang it up. I think he's going to be on the team as a gunner. So he might have to, take a year, play on the practice squad. If somebody gets hurt, they can elevate him right away, because I think, again, you talk about a guy with his size and speed. If he can start to learn at corner and, develop into a viable corner, think about a guy with his size and speed.
I mean, we're going to talk about another one right now.
Yeah.
they double dipped, and I kind of like, we knew that corner was a need. They obviously addressed it early with one of our favorite picks in Christian Gonzalez that we talked about to start the show. And then they double dip with 2 cornerbacks at the end of the draft that, we're talking about Isaiah Bolden now for Jackson State University, 7th round, pick 28, 6'2", 203. Another guy that has very good speed. And so height, weight, speed, back-to-back corner, Steve, I would say again, I'd say very similar things. There's a reason that these two guys, when you're talking about guys that possess the height, weight, speed combos that these guys do, there's a reason that they're there day 3. And the reason that they're there is usually technique related, bad tape, injuries, etc. I think Isaiah Bolden, there's a lot of things that I'd say very similar to Amir Speed, and the fact that I think both of them just get a little sloppy. They're developmental guys. And basically what Bill did here and Matt Groh, I think, is just taking 2 guys at a position of need that they can take as balls of clay and try to mold them and get their technique to where they need to be. Because if you can get even one of these guys to pan out, you're talking about a steal and a potentially quality starter for you down the line. Yeah.
And again, you said, another big corner, 6'2", 203. Yep. He ran a 4.31 in the 40.
Yep.
And he led the nation in kickoff returns in 2021. He averaged almost 37 yards per kick return, and he returned 2 for touchdowns. Last year, Deion Sanders, the coach, removed him from kickoff returns, not because they didn't, have faith in him, but Deion wanted him to focus on becoming a better corner, which I thought was a really intriguing thing. And it shows you how Deion is thinking about developing his own players. And I love this because, here's a guy who led the country in kickoff returns, but now you're telling him, hey, if you want to play at the next level, you need to become a better cornerback. So they started him at corner last year. And believe it or not, for a guy of his size, they put him in the slot. And, we all know how slot corners have a much tougher job than the guys on the outside.
Sure.
Because they're going to have leverage either one way or the other. You have to have, the strength, you have to have the length, and you have to have that burst where you can change direction. And you're talking about a physical guy plays with the edge against, the running game. And for him to be able to play in the slot at his size, I just think he's a very intriguing guy. I can't wait to see film of him, of how he matches up in training camp against, NFL wide receivers.
And I think both of these guys that we're talking about, Speed and Bolden, they both could easily find themselves on the practice squad. One of them, if they stand out in training camp, Steve, or over this spring practices, maybe we're talking about one of them sneaks on as a special teamer, whether it's Bolden as the kick returner, whether it's Speed as like some kind of a gunner. I think both, I could see either one. But again, talking about two guys that have great size speed, combinations, some uneven tape, but some interesting traits to kind of build on. Give me your favorite and least favorite player, from this class. I think I'm just going to tell you right now, I think both of us is Christian Gonzalez for favorite. But if we have to pick a second favorite, Steve, who do you have?
I'm going to go with Keion White. I was thinking about really Boutte, but when I look at Keion White, I think he has Patriot written all over him.
Yeah, he does.
And everyone describes it all business, And
he is, and a lot of people made fun of his draft reaction because he just didn't show a lot of emotion, and he just said like he was just like taking it all in, and he's just kind of about his business, and he seems very kind of calm demeanor and just kind of quiet and more a little bit of a recluse, So I can see why they liked him from that respect.
And I read somewhere where one of the Georgia coaches was upset with him at first because when he'd go in meetings, he wouldn't take notes, but he would ask questions all through the meetings. And the one thing I liked when I heard this was the coach said, he not only asked what his responsibilities were, but how everyone else on the defense, what was their responsibility? Where were they going to be lining up? And that just screams a Bill Belichick kind of guy.
I totally agree. How about your least favorite pick, Steve? And if you want a second to think about it, I can go.
No, and I'm not knocking the guy at all because we said he played all three interior offensive line positions. I'm going to go with Andrews a little bit because I'm not saying I'm knocking this player, but, I just thought it was a little bit of a reach at that point, and I'm still stuck on that, They could have gone for a different position at that point, but I think he's a good football player. I just thought they could have had him a little later.
So I had this. I'll start with my least favorite because it's the same as yours. And one of my biggest things about him is I just felt like it was a reach. And I thought that DeJuan Jones he was there for the taking. He went 4 picks later, and he's a prototypical right tackle for the Patriots. And his comp is Trent Brown. So I thought it just made too much sense for the Patriots there. And I thought that if you had taken a DeJuan Jones there, we'd be talking about great value. Even if he's not going to start year one, you think that he could be a potential right tackle for you moving forward. Him and Mike Onwenu together on the right side, that would have been two massive human beings to move. And I thought that you got a guy that just felt really underwhelming to me. So again, am I shocked they took a couple of interior offensive linemen? No. Do I think that they need to think about David Andrews, potential replacement or a backup center? Yes, because I don't think they have that guy right now. But I just thought that they could have taken that early, a little bit later, Steve. I just thought that was to it. My favorite pick is actually a guy that you mentioned, but you went in a different direction. Mine's Kayshon Boutte because of really the value, Steve. I just if they had taken him in the first couple of rounds, I would have thought that would have been a reach given his ankle situation, given how bad his film was last year. In round 6, you're talking about 187 overall. You have a guy that put together 2 tremendous years in the SEC and a lot of really nice production. I just think that he has traits to potentially be a top 3 receiver for you. Maybe not year 1, but certainly potentially in year 2.
Yeah, and again, he was right there for me, but I just went with White because I love defense. So, you know,
Yeah, I understand. I
so
understand that.
I went with him because I just think he screams a Patriot pick, and a guy that Belichick is going to fall in love with. Just the fact that everyone says he's all business, and that's Belichick wants guys that eat, sleep, football.
Yeah, definitely. Chris writes in with a question. He was saying that a certain Claire Cooper was very upset that no tight end was drafted. Were you guys surprised that no tight end was drafted? And I'll start first. I was definitely surprised. You have 2 guys on the roster, both on 1-year contracts, both kind of highly paid players. It was a very deep class. I thought that, especially in that, again, right around where that Jake Andrews pick was, I thought the tight end was in play just as much as DeJuan Jones was a tackle. I thought that they were going to address offense a little bit earlier, Steve, and I didn't expect as many interior offensive linemen. What about you?
Yeah, same thing. Because if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Darnell Washington still on the board when
yes, but there's his the knee issues with him or whatever. I don't know if it's both knees or one knee, but you knew when he fell out of round 2 that there was something medically. And again, like I don't you can kill me if I misevaluate a guy. The 2 biggest problems that we have, Steve, that are undeniable is that we can't get into the room with these guys and we can't see their medicals. And so when things like that come out, you just have to say, you know what, it is what it is. Hopefully he can get himself back, to where he needs to be in order to become a pro, because he's incredibly his size and potential are right there. But he's
like another tackle that can catch the football.
Oh yeah, I mean the Patriots don't have the guy that's like Darnell Washington, for example.
No.
I would have liked Tucker Kraft or some of those guys kind of in that early day 3 range, late day 2. But yeah. So Chris, to answer your question, yeah, we were
both surprised by that.
Yeah. Let's get to our initial grades, Steve, for this draft class. And look, I want to preface this by saying I think this is a dumb exercise, but I'm doing it anyway. I think, Steve, for me, I think I'd go with a B. Maybe I think I'd go with a B minus. I loved the Christian Gonzalez pick. There's a lot of guys that I'll go with a B. I don't think B minus. I think a B. I like some of the versatility. I like a lot of the versatility in this draft class. I like the athleticism in this draft class. I did think that defensive line was certainly kind of a need. We talked about that. I liked the athletes. They took a corner late. I like the Butte pick for value. I think Marte Mapu is an interesting athlete, and he adds to the mix. And then, of course, again, Christian Gonzalez, who I just thought was one of their biggest needs. I think it helps you in so many ways, especially if you have Jalen Mills going to free safety potentially. You can either keep John Jones on the outside, put him or keep him on the inside and put Jack Jones out there. Or maybe if you think Marcus Jones is a better player, you put him in the slot and have Jones and Gonzalez as your outside guys. I mean, I just think that you have a lot more options here. Give me your grade and why, Steve.
Yeah, I'm like you. I don't care for this exercise in grading a draft right after it happens when none of these guys have been on the field yet. But I'm going to give him a B plus. I'm going to go B plus because just from the fact that I'm so intrigued with some of these guys, Mapu, Butte, the 2 corners at the end of the draft, they address some depth in the middle of the offensive line. And I just I'm intrigued by all this, so I'm gonna go glass half full with this. I know Chris said he read that they were given a draft grade of A minus, and again, I don't care for the 2 2 days after the draft, people giving a letter grade to it. We really won't know how good this draft was for 2 to 3 years. But
Absolutely.
Initial impressions, I really liked what they did. There was a couple of surprises, in there, but I think they addressed a lot of what they needed. They brought in an undrafted free agent tight end who more of a blocker, which I think they need. And the quarterback that they brought in undrafted as well, I think he's going to stick on the practice squad because he's going to be their scout team quarterback that's going to play the role of all of these mobile quarterbacks that they're going to face.
I totally agree.
So I like that move as well. And the fact that, special teams was such a horror last year, they addressed this in spades. New kicker, second best in the country, best punter in the country. I really like all of those, and the other special teams guys. I love all of these moves. I think special teams is going to be much, much better this year. And offensively, with the guys that they brought in free agency in the draft, I think the offense is going to be much, much better this year. Did I lose you?
Oh. Yeah, sorry. I'm having a coughing attack.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that, everybody. Someone went down the wrong pipe. Here, fill me in, Steve. Give me something else you got while I catch my breath here.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, I was just talking about the players that they brought in, but I think the biggest addition to the offense is now Bill O'Brien. And I think he's going to make a world of difference with this offense. This is something he's ran before. Not only did they bring in Mike Gesicki, Juju Smith-Schuster, the fact that he's much more adept at, finding ways to make these guys get open against defenses that they're going up against. And I think his in-game adjustments will be much, much better. I just think this offense is, a lot of people kept saying we need a number one. They never really had a number one. And I know we're getting into an old argument here. I think that the pieces that they have, if they use them correctly, this offense is going to be much, much better. And I like the way that O'Brien uses his tight ends. And I think Gesicki is perfectly suited for that.
You know what? I think that, again, so many times with Bill Belichick, you have to read between the lines and kind of look at the tea leaves and look at maybe not what he says, because he's not going to come out and tell you what he's doing or what he's truly thinking, and really he shouldn't. But if you look at what they've done so far, they brought in Bill O'Brien because I think he knew that the coaching wasn't where it needed to be on that side of the ball last year. He added Gesicki, as you said, because that complements Bill O'Brien's system. On defense, they've got younger, more athletic, more versatile, I think. And then Bill talks about we know how much of an emphasis he has on special teams. He addresses special teams all over this draft again. He's telling you what they needed to do. Special teams was not good last year outside of Marcus Jones. Okay. And, defense, I think the defense was pretty solid. It's usually going to be pretty good under Bill, and offensively, we all knew that they underperformed. So I think that right now we're seeing, maybe it's not exactly what we thought was going to happen, but I think he's addressing a lot of things, and I'll also say this too. I was shocked about tight end. I wasn't overly shocked about receiver because I just don't think the board fell the way that they were kind of hoping for. And I think that Jackson Smith and Jigba could have been the pick in the first round if Christian Gonzalez was there. But I think they thought Christian Gonzalez was going to be gone. And, they were able to trade down a couple of spots and pick up an additional day 3 pick. I think one of the more surprising things, Steve, is that they didn't package a couple of those day threes and move up a little bit more. But again, I think it takes two to tango. Some people forget that, and I think that a lot of teams weren't extremely high on this draft class as a whole. So there were a lot of teams that were electing to kind of move down, and I don't think that anyone should be really overly surprised about anything like that.
No, and I think Daniel Jeremiah pretty much said the same thing you did. That teams were not really looking to move up much. They were more looking to move down. And that tells you they weren't enamored with the overall quality of this draft class. I think it was really, really stocked at certain positions, but not so much at others. And overall, it probably wasn't one of the better draft classes. So...
Yeah, no, I agree. And look, I think that they could still make a trade. There are still free agents they can bring in. So the puzzle is not totally set, but I do think that you're going to probably see a shift in potential, maybe adding to the receiver room, probably some moves at tight end, and potentially quarterback, depending on how the situation comes out next offseason. We'll see. We'll see how, this year goes for Mac and the offense, and hopefully that they kind of rebound and have a good year. But I think on paper they already are better than they were last year. I think it's too early to give any kind of prediction for the season. We can always do that when we get closer, because again, there's still parts that can be moving here. So yeah. I want to see kind of where we're at.
Yeah, the roster that we're seeing right now isn't going to be the roster that we're seeing in September.
Yep. No, I agree. Steve, any final thoughts before we head out today?
No, I just think that, I think we were right where we said the Patriots are going to go defense in the first round. We just didn't expect Christian Gonzalez to be there, but lucky for them that he was. I don't get a lot of the negativity surrounding this kid. I think he's a very, very good corner, and I think he's going to be there for years to come. I think they did a really good job of, filling some of the holes that they had. And now we're going to have to see how these players work out. Training camp and mini camps this year are going to be really intriguing to watch, because I think a lot of these guys have a legitimate shot at making the team.
No, I totally agree. So it'll be fun to kind of see how we're doing, and how they build and what other moves they make, etc. As far as the show goes, we'll see what comes out. We'll see what comes out over the next week. If there's some good news, we'll talk about it. If not, we'll probably take like a 2 week, we'll take like a little, break next week, and then we'll circle back around. So we'll go from there. I definitely want to make sure I say again for people to check out all the great content on PatsFans.com, brought to you by our fearless leader, Ian Logue. I also want, again, please urge you to subscribe to us on YouTube. Check us out on Apple Podcasts. Please like, share, leave us a review. It keeps us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. And I appreciate everyone who has all the great questions and interaction we had through this whole draft, Steven, this whole draft season. Steve and I both appreciate it very much, and we enjoy it. We've talked about how much we enjoy it, and I'm sad it's over, but it was fun. I always love this time of year, but now we're looking on to eyes are kind of getting set to mini camps, OTAs, training camp. I know we're several months away from that, but it'll be here before we know it. So looking forward to that. Again, for Steve Balestrieri, I am Derek Havens. Thank you again for everyone for listening to Patriots 4th and 2. We will see you guys in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Chris.